Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. At least 389 people have been killed and more than 1,400 remain missing in Nepal and Tibet after flash floods devastated the Himalayan border region on Wednesday. More than 500 foreigners are among the missing, including nationals from the United States, India, and South Korea. As rescue operations continue, Seoul's rapid response team has arrived in Nepal to support the search for 9 missing Koreans. With major roads and bridges cut off, rapid access to the affected area is expected to depend on helicopter support from the Nepalese government. Iran says it's preparing a list of conditions for reopening the Strait of Hormuz. This comes as diplomatic efforts continue to mediate an end to the 6-month war, with Qatar's Prime Minister visiting Tehran for talks with Iran's Foreign Minister. Thousands of people are still unaccounted for in Nepal and Tibet after catastrophic flooding swept through the region. Rescue teams are working around the clock to reach those who may still be trapped, while families wait anxiously for news of their loved ones. Our Buniryeon starts us off.
Rescue teams in Nepal and Tibet are racing to find more than 1,400 people still missing, 2 days after a glacier collapse unleashed catastrophic flooding along the Himalayan border. The disaster, which struck Wednesday, has killed at least 389 people in Nepal, according to local authorities. Among the missing are more than 500 foreigners from countries including the United States, India, and South Korea. Many of them are believed to have been on pilgrimage routes near the border. Officials expect the death toll to rise as search teams comb through mud-covered villages downstream. For families of the missing, the wait has been agonizing. Chimindi Straster's 26-year-old son was driving a truck when floodwaters hit. She says she hasn't heard from him since.
My son is stuck in the floods. He is a truck driver, and he said he was driving. And we last spoke at around 8:30. After that, there is no news of him. We are not able to find out anything.
Scientists believe the flood was triggered when a section of glacier and rock gave way high in the mountains, sending a wall of water, mud and debris crashing through the Bagmati region and into Tibet's Jirang County. The surge destroyed roads, bridges and a key border crossing, complicating rescue access. Nepal's army has evacuated workers trapped at a hydropower plant and pulled dozens of survivors out by helicopter. Authorities say more than 17,000 personnel are now involved in the search, with roughly 1,470 people rescued so far. Meanwhile, Chinese authorities have warned of another potential flood after the landslide blocked rivers, creating a large lake along the border. They say the barrier could break, sending another surge of water into areas already devastated by Wednesday's floods. Buniryeon, Arirang News.
So as Nepal races to locate hundreds missing following flooding on Wednesday, the Korean government is also mounting its own emergency operation for 9 nationals whose whereabouts remain unknown. Our Oh Soo-young has the details.
An 11-member Korean government rapid response team has arrived in Nepal as 9 Koreans remain unaccounted for following severe flooding. The team reached Kathmandu on Thursday local time, led by Im Sang-woo, the government's representative for overseas Korean protection and consular affairs. The team, comprising officials from the Foreign Ministry, the National Fire Agency and the National Police Agency, will begin assessing conditions on Friday before beginning full-scale search and rescue support.
We will do everything possible to ensure the swift and safe search and rescue of our nationals in Nepal.
Response teams from Busan and Ability and Korea Southeast Power also travelled to Nepal on Thursday. The flooding struck the northern Rasua district on Wednesday morning local time, where the companies were building a hydroelectric power plant. 9 Koreans connected to the project remain missing. Of another 10 who had been stranded, 9 were flown to safety by a Nepalese military helicopter on Thursday. The remaining person, a Busan and Ability site manager, stayed behind with 2 South Korean embassy staff. With major roads and bridges cut off, rapid access to the affected area is expected to depend on helicopter support from the Nepalese government. Depending on the Korean response team's assessment, Seoul will decide whether to send additional rescue support. On Thursday, Foreign Minister Cho Hyun, during a phone call with his Nepalese counterpart, said Seoul is considering deploying a Korea disaster relief team to support wider relief efforts. Cho also announced $1 million in humanitarian assistance for Nepal's emergency response and early recovery. He requested Nepal's active support in locating the 9 Koreans out of reach and coordinating with the response team. The government says it has received no further reports of Koreans unaccounted for, but is monitoring the situation closely as Nepal is a popular destination for Korean travellers. The Foreign Ministry announced Friday the appointment of a new ambassador to Nepal, Park Jae-kyung, who has served as Director General for ASEAN and Southeast Asian Affairs, and most recently Ambassador to Zimbabwe. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The annual Jackson Hole Economic Policy Symposium opened on Thursday in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, bringing together central bankers, economists, financial market participants, and policymakers to discuss key economic and financial issues. The event has served as the backdrop for a number of speeches that have shaped monetary policy and financial markets. For more on this, we're joined today by Greg Bushak, Professor of Finance at Stanford Graduate School of Business at Stanford University. So, Professor Bushak, thanks for coming on. A lot of attention is now focused on what Kevin Warsh will say at the Jackson Hole Symposium. What should we be watching for in terms of the direction of monetary policy and the Fed's approach to inflation?
Sure. So I think the key thing that I'd be listening for is his framework, rather than him saying, oh, we're going to hike in the next meeting or something like this. So what do I mean by this? First, I think, what does he think is causing inflation? Is it mainly due to excess demand that the Fed needs to restrain? Is it supply shocks that the Fed should wait out? Second, what's the evidence that would really make him act? So inflation has hovered around 3% for a while. If inflation stays around 3% while employment remains strong, is that enough to justify a tighter policy, or does he want clearer evidence that inflation is becoming embedded in wages and expectations that would suggest it's something sort of longer term and something he needs to act on? And then third, sort of how much tightening does he think the Fed needs to do in a context where financial markets are already sort of raising rates on the longer end? So longer term rates are much higher. And the question is whether these longer term rates are already cooling housing markets and business investment. And if that's going on, Warsh may see less need to raise short-term rates immediately. So again, I wouldn't focus too much on whether he says, oh, we're going to hike in September. I think that the bigger question is, what's his policy function? What's worrying him, what's he's watching, and what would cause him to tighten or loosen policy?
Right, and the Fed is still sharply divided over a possible rate hike, right?
That's right, yes.
Right. So how might the inflation, the current situation with the current economic situation determine the Fed's next steps?
Sure. So I think, one way to think about what's going on in the U.S. economy right now is there's a lot of sources of demand kind of competing for the same real resources, and that just makes price goes up. So, you have this huge AI build out. It's demanding electricity, construction, chips, skilled workers. You have big government expenditures and deficits. That's adding demand as well without kind of an offsetting government revenue that's sucking up demand. And then at the same time, you have an aging population and some regulatory blockers to real investment. And this means the labor supply and productive capacity are growing sort of more slowly than they would otherwise. So things like AI, they may be enormously productive, but sort of right now we're in the investment stage of that. We're building data centers, we're buying chips, but we haven't seen sort of a comparable explosion in the physical supply of housing or energy or manufactured goods that would push prices down. So I think sort of the basic tension that's going on, there's very strong aggregate demand, and that's hitting relatively constrained aggregate supply. That's kind of the natural environment for inflation to remain sticky, even as things like consumer spending begin to cool.
Right, and last month's personal consumption expenditure came in slightly higher than expected. What does that tell us about the current state of the U.S. economy?
So that's saying that the Fed is targeting a 2% inflation rate over the long term. 3% is above that, and we've been above that for a pretty long time. So that's really saying this level is higher than what the Fed wants. Labor market is still resilient, consumer spending is still resilient, but this is all sort of happening in the context of big investment and big government deficits that are sort of pushing up aggregate supply.
I see. And tech stocks lifted Wall Street after Nvidia said it forecast a 70% jump in revenue in the next fiscal year. Now, the market for AI computing is expanding rather than peaking. Will this help reassure investors who have questioned how long this AI spending boom can last?
Yeah, I think so. And this is also a big part of the inflation story as well. Nvidia is basically saying our customers still want vastly more computing power. Now, as for whether there's a bubble, I think there's kind of an important distinction to think about here. So Nvidia's results tell us that people really want to use the technology. It doesn't necessarily imply that the technology is being put to a very productive use or that it will ultimately make money for different parties in the economy. So for the first point, frankly, if you've used it, the technology is really, really good. It keeps getting better. And I think we will see real productivity gains from it once we see sort of a build out of this and a way for this to percolate into the real kind of physical economy. Now, for the second point, it's not clear who ultimately in the economy is going to capture these gains. There's the hardware providers like Nvidia or SK Hynix, the AI labs like OpenAI or Anthropic. They may capture a large share of the rents. On the other hand, there's increasing competition on both fronts from China, from open source models, and things like this could translate into the benefits being widely distributed, captured by businesses, consumers who are ultimately using the tools. So I think, if the question is AI demand real? I think the evidence is increasingly yes. But the question of, are we in a bubble? What's going to happen to asset prices? That's really about who captures the economic rents. And there could be big AI losers, even if the technology itself is very successful and widely adopted.
I see. All right, Professor Busak, thank you so much for coming on today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
South Korean chipmaker SK Hynix has broken ground on a new AI memory packaging facility in the United States. The company held a ceremony on Thursday at Purdue University for what will become its first next-generation high-bandwidth memory production hub in Indiana. SK Hynix plans to invest more than $4 billion, with mass production expected to begin in the second half of 2029. The facility is projected to employ about 1,000 people and become a key U.S. HBM production base by 2030. SK Hynix will also build a research and development testbed for advanced chip packaging technologies. Over in the Middle East, Iran is laying out its conditions for reopening the Strait of Hormuz as Oman and Qatar step up mediation efforts. Tehran says any deal must include an end to the regional war. Meanwhile, talks continue on a temporary shipping corridor. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
Iran is preparing a list of conditions for reopening the Strait of Hormuz as regional mediators intensify efforts to ease tensions and restore shipping through the key waterway. Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, Mohsen Rezai, says mediators asked Tehran to set out its demands with an end to the regional war among Iran's main conditions. Rezai says Iran has also reached an understanding with Oman on a possible shipping corridor through the strait. Under the proposal, vessels would travel through a designated central channel, passing through both Omani and Iranian waters, provided the United States meets Tehran's conditions. Iran and Oman are still working on the details. Iran's Revolutionary Guards have said Tehran will not agree to fully reopen the strait unless Washington lifts what Iran describes as a blockade of its ports, removes sanctions, and provides compensation. At the same time, Qatar is stepping up its mediation efforts. Qatari Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani visited Tehran on Thursday for talks with Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. It marks the first high-level Qatari visit to Iran since the war began on February 28th. According to Qatar's state news agency, the two sides discussed ways to reduce tensions and create conditions for renewed dialogue between Iran and the United States. They also reviewed a proposed phased plan for the Strait of Hormuz, including a temporary shipping corridor and a joint effort to clear mines from the waterway. Sheikh Mohammed stressed the importance of respecting regional sovereignty and ensuring freedom of navigation while calling for continued diplomacy. 이승재, Arirang News.
Mobile supermarkets are bringing groceries to Korea's rural areas, helping older residents who have limited access to nearby grocery stores. Our Baek Ju-hee reports.
A small market has opened up in a village in Okcheon. It's a one-ton truck modified into a supermarket, with its shelves stocked with food and other daily necessities. As it settles in, villagers start coming out to see what's on offer.
Today I got flour and rice too. They bring it right to us, so I'm grateful. We old people can't get out, so we're always waiting for them.
This is Hyangsu Mobile Market, and it comes to villages where buying groceries used to mean a trip of 30 minutes or more.
The older residents are really happy with it. Before, buses were hard to get on and didn't come often, and many of them have trouble getting around. Now the truck comes right into the village, and they'll even carry it to the door.
Since July, the truck has made the same rounds through 10 villages every few days, and shoppers pay with a rural basic income card worth 150,000 won, or about $108 a month.
Okcheon is a region facing depopulation, so there just aren't many stores left. We started the mobile market at our center to help boost local spending. We're trying to do our small part to bring people back and get the local economy moving again.
Nationally, fewer and fewer people in the countryside can buy groceries close to home. By 2025, only 22.5% bought them inside their own village, down 12.6 percentage points from 2014.
When you combine a shrinking population with older residents eating less, total food demand in these areas falls. That's why so many businesses and supermarkets have closed down and disappeared, leaving these communities without access to the goods and services they need.
With demand too thin to keep a store opened, the government has been filling the gap, funding mobile markets since 2024 with 9 counties running them as pilot sites. It now plans to bring in more local governments and offer expert consulting to help each one draw up its own operating plan. And on Wednesday, Parliament passed a revision to the country's farming and food law that makes food access a legal responsibility of the government and requires the Agriculture Ministry to survey the problem every 5 years. The government plans to expand the mobile market programs to more counties in the coming years. With new measures on the road, the hope is that more villages like the ones in Okcheon will have somewhere to shop, whether that's a store on the road or a truck that pulls up at the door. Baek Ju-hee, Arirang News, Okcheon.
Last week, a container ship left Korea's southern port of Busan, heading north to test an Arctic commercial route that could cut sailing time to Europe. Our political correspondent An Sung-jin sat down with the mayor of the port city to hear how he plans to make Busan a global hub, from Arctic shipping to tourism.
Busan, Korea's second largest city, is home to more than 3 million people. Located on the country's southeastern coast, the city is seeking to expand its role as a hub for both maritime industries and tourism. At the center of that vision is a push to establish Busan as Korea's maritime capital.
What Korea needs is a new growth center outside the Seoul metropolitan area that can compete with the capital on equal footing. By doing so, we can move to a more balanced, multi-centered economy.
The mayor of Busan says this transformation will build on opportunities already emerging, including the Northern Sea Route, a shipping highway through the Arctic that is a potential shortcut for global trade between Asia and Europe as polar ice melts. The Pan-Star Accra container ship departed from Busan on August 22nd, marking the first time a Korean container ship makes a journey. The round trip is expected to take about 40 to 45 days.
그럼 이제 말씀하신 대로 사실 이번에 그 시범운항으로 출발한 아크로호를 언급 안 할 수가 없을 것 같은데 이제 앞으로 그걸 이제 시범운항한 걸 토대로 좀 어떤 계획이라던가 구체적인 좀 준비 단계를 밟고 계신가요?
Once the ship returns, we'll have a lot of valuable data from the optimal routes to water depth, ocean currents, weather conditions, and the movement of polar ice. We need to keep building that database to help us collect the expertise and technology we need, which would give Busan a real competitive advantage in Arctic shipping.
The Arctic route is just one part of Busan's broader ambitions. Ton, who previously served as Minister of Oceans and Fisheries, also says the city is preparing to host the 2028 United Nations Ocean Conference. Beyond shipping and ports, Busan's beachside district of Haeundae has been designated as Korea's first global tourism special zone, and the city looks to build on that momentum.
We look to significantly expand the tourism budget for next year to invest more heavily in tourism infrastructure, content, and experiences so tourists have even more reasons to come back. I had immediately set up a tourism task force after taking office, and our goal is to make Busan a tourism city that represents not only Korea, but the world.
For Mayor Ton, the vision is clear. Make Busan a maritime capital, a global tourism destination, and ultimately one of Korea's next major growth engines. 안성진, Arirang News, Busan.
Good morning, I'm Choo Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. In the United States, President Donald Trump wants Lake Ontario to be renamed Lake America. He signed an order to that effect on Thursday as conflict with Canada deepens. The order tells the Interior Department to change the name in official U.S. records immediately. Canada is not expected to recognize the change, and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said the lake's name is more than 400 years old and that Canadians will keep calling it Lake Ontario. Lake Ontario sits on the border of the U.S. and Canada. Last year, Trump renamed the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. In the United States, Meta says it has shut down an Iranian operation aimed at influencing people through social media. Meta's report said Thursday it removed Facebook and Instagram accounts tied to operators in Iran. Those accounts were routed through the U.S. or Canada to hide their origin and used artificial intelligence to push posts and make memes about American politics. Some posed as American activists, students, and designers living in cities in the United States and tagged real journalists and politicians in their posts. About 79,000 accounts followed at least one of the Iranian accounts. In the United States, shares in the chipmaker Nvidia jumped 8.7% on Thursday, its biggest one-day gain since April 2025. The surge added $442 billion to the company's value, the second largest one-day gain ever. Strong quarterly results and a forecast of 70% revenue growth for the 2028 financial year eased fears of cooling AI demand. The rally lifted the wider market. The S&P 500 rose 0.7% and the Nasdaq gained 1.6%. Attention now shifts to Federal Reserve Chairman Kevin Warsh, who speaks at Jackson Hole on Friday. In Japan, the artist Yayoi Kusama has died at the age of 97. Her museum said she died in hospital on August 14th and gave no cause. Kusama was known for her dot-covered paintings, pumpkin sculptures, and mirrored rooms. She said she had seen hallucinations of dots and flashing lights since childhood. She voluntarily lived in a psychiatric hospital from 1977 and painted until her final days.
Conditions are about to lean towards cooler conditions with rain and showers in the forecast. Southern provinces will see heavier rainfall today due to warm southerly winds carrying extra moisture to rain clouds. Then southern parts of Gangwon-do province and most of southern provinces could see 70 to 80 millimeters of heavy rainfall, with a rain advisory being issued in parts of Jeollanam-do, Gyeongsang-nam-do, as well as Jeju-do Island. Then some passing showers are in the forecast for the capital area. Today's rain will provide relief from the heat, and especially those in southern provinces will notice the difference. But Seoul will be as hot as yesterday, topping out at 32 degrees Celsius. Daegu, Busan, Gwangju will make it to 31 degrees this afternoon. Rain will spread up north tomorrow, and most of the country will see rain on Saturday, possibly into Sunday. Then starting starting next week, we could notice much more comfortable mornings and evenings, while afternoon heat will stay around 30 degrees Celsius.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.